people call this a government takeover of healthcare because if you have the government forcing Americans to purchase health insurance, which this legislation would do, require all Americans to purchase health insurance whether they want it or not, then government has to define what health insurance is so that you know if you're complying with that mandate. Once the government defines what health insurance is, they're going to tell you what kind of benefits you have to buy, how much cost sharing you can have. They're going to be able to control the prices that are charged for that health insurance. They can even, as they're doing in Massachusetts, trying to use that mandate to control the relationships between doctors and insurance companies.
But let me jump in there, so because there are aspects of what you were talking about in the bills. But earlier you talked about the private business perhaps being able to do it better if it was left alone to do it better. But in a largely unregulated space, they did all kinds of things. These proposals came about because of what insurance companies were already doing.
But that's exactly
limiting the risk pool, restricting access to care, rising prices more than the rate of inflation every year, year after year after year, so that you were paying more and getting less year after year without any government interference. This was what private business was doing. The mandate, or what you call forcing people to get health care whether they don't want it, was in some people's view a way of stopping heavy subsidies by increasing the risk pool so that the people who use care at this time in their life least would still be paying in so you could amortize the cost when they were older and needed more care.
I think that I was building toward that issue, and I think that the government is responsible for most of those problems that you're identifying and ascribing to the private market. Certainly they are taking place in the private market, but government is very heavily involved in even private health insurance, and I'll give you one example in its pre-existing conditions. Arguably, government is the biggest contributor to the problem of pre-existing conditions for precisely the reason that we were talking about. The government encourages people to purchase employer-sponsored health insurance, which is another way of saying it penalizes people if they purchase health insurance on their own. You have to pay a huge tax penalty, so you may end up paying twice as much for the same coverage if you buy health insurance directly from an insurance company, insurance that provides you seamless coverage between jobs so that you don't lose your insurance when you lose your job, and that provides you protection against your premiums going up if you get sick. Instead of letting people purchase that kind of insurance, the government penalizes them, pushes them into employer-sponsored insurance so that 60% of Americans get their insurance this way. And with that kind of insurance, this type of insurance that the government picked for as its favorite, leaves you without coverage when you get sick and can't work anymore. And that's when you most need your coverage.
The government that you're talking about
exactly.
is people elected by voters who then go and pass regulations in Washington that reflect voter taste, because the voters elected these people. There's nothing in those statute books that weren't put there, that was not put there by senators and members of the House of Representatives who are elected by people. When you talk about government as some amorphous group of who put these people in charge, we put them in charge. But for better or worse, we put them in charge.
And that decision happened more than 60 years ago, and it wasn't actually a decision of the people. It was an historical accident where the IRS just decided, all right, we won't tax employer-sponsored health benefits. And then as that grew and people liked that not being taxed, yes, Congress did codify that in the 1950s. But what has happened is people have been losing their coverage when they lose their job. They're uninsured, they have a pre-existing condition, and they can't get coverage. If they had bought coverage on their own, a lot of them wouldn't be in this situation, but people have been hurt by that for 60 years. And we, the people, the government, are not fixing that problem. It has taken 6 decades of a lot of suffering, and we still haven't fixed that problem. So if you want to, so first of all, it's not a failing of the private sector, that the problem of pre-existing conditions, or at least the largest contributor to that is government. And this is what happens when you give government more control.
So quickly, before we go to the break, you like the Obama proposals to start taxing benefits?
I would like to see some sort of similar tax reform that provides union workers, older workers, female workers with the largest tax cuts rather than the largest tax increases that President Obama proposes.
Okay. We need to take a break. Don't forget, you too can be a part of our discussions. Participate on our blog by visiting www.hitn.tv/DCB. Destination Casablanca will continue in a moment discussing the possible benefits of reform. Stay with us.